Good morning, everyone. My name is Mighty Stream, and I'm going to do your September the 24th, just for today, in a meditation. Hope you all are doing well. I saw that I was at 339 subscribers. I think I lost one along the way, and I'm not sure why, but welcome you back if that's you. Okay, the title of the meditation for today, A Growing Concept of God. The only suggested guidelines are that this power be loving, caring, and greater than ourselves. We don't have to be religious to accept this idea. The point is that we open our minds to believe. Basic text, page 24. In a lifelong process of coming to believe, our understanding of God will change. The understanding we have when new in recovery will not be the same when we have a few months clean, nor will that understanding be the same when we have a few years clean. Our initial understanding of a power greater than ourselves will most likely be limited. That power will keep us clean, but we may think nothing more. We may hesitate to pray because we have placed conditions on what we will ask our higher power to do for us. Oh, this stuff is so awful. Even God couldn't do anything, we might say, or God's got a lot of people to take care of. There's no time for me. But as we grow in recovery, so will our understanding. We'll begin to see that the only limits to God's love and grace are those we impose by refusing to step out of the way. The loving God we come to believe in is infinite, and the power and love we find in our belief is shared by nearly every recovering addict around the world. Just for today, the God I am coming to understand has a limitless capacity for love and care. I will trust that my God is bigger than any problem I may have. Let's take a moment of silence, followed by the we version of the Serenity Prayer. Moment of silence now, please. Thank you. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things that we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just for today, please and thank you. A growing concept of God. I know for me, I really didn't think that, oh, my stuff is so awful. Even God couldn't do anything with that. I didn't have that frame of mind when I first got clean. When I first got clean, I was filled with so much guilt, shame, and remorse that the thought of taking it to God almost seemed too childish to me. I didn't think that it was, so awful that God couldn't do anything with it. I had obviously seen many wonderful acts of mercy, grace. I had seen that in other people's lives. So it wasn't that. I just felt that what I had learned in life was that you assume responsibility for your behavior and you deal with the consequences of your behavior, and you don't try to push blame off on anyone else. And if there was a problem, something that was overwhelming me, then 9 times out of 10, I deserved that feeling of being overwhelmed. There was no way I was going to ask God to do anything with what I thought was the price I had to pay for my bad decision. So for me, it was quite different, but probably not that different from other people. It's just another perspective that I don't believe um, fits the way that it's worded here. But at the end of the day, the end result was the same, right? The similarity for me in this meditation is greater than the difference, which was that I didn't pray. Not about certain things, because I believed that I deserved, that those were consequences of my behavior, and I deserved to deal with them on my own. So what I was doing was I was taking what I had learned or thought I had learned from parents, because as I stayed clean for a while, I began to realize that some of my perception about my parents was inaccurate. But what I thought I was learning from them was that if you do wrong, you pay the price for it. And we don't save your butt just because you're our child. You're going to face the music just like anybody else. That really wasn't the message that they were giving, but that's what I believed was their message. And so I was taking that relationship with a human, right? And I was trying to humanize my relationship, my perception of God, which was very spiritual in nature to me. But I was again trying to take something from my physical perception and shape my spiritual perception to that physicality. And that does not work when you're dealing with a spiritual program. And that does not work when you are choosing a higher power that's spiritual in nature. Now, if I'm choosing a human being as my higher power, or I'm choosing something else that I can see, feel, and touch, right? In this realm of the earth. If I'm doing that, then, maybe that would work. But for a spiritual program and a higher power that is spiritual in nature, it didn't work, right? It didn't work at all. It wasn't practical, and so it wasn't spiritual. That was in the beginning. Then over time, cycling through, I want to say cycling through experiences, uh, good and bad. It's important for me to say that. Going through life, experiencing both good and bad, and choosing to stay clean, began to develop my spiritual understanding that the stuff that I was experiencing in the here and now, um, in the present, the physicality of living life, that was much smaller than my spirit. My spirit was becoming greater because of my understanding that I was learning from, that I was getting from the things I was going through in life. So let me give you a real experience and then I'll move on, okay? Give you a real experience. Um, The first encounter that I had with death, now my mother had already lost another child, but that child was much older than me, right? So the first encounter that I personally had with death was my pops, right? My stepfather. I learned that, and a lot of people know me. I have three rings in my nose, right? I have three piercings on my nose, and it came from this experience. When my pops passed away, I had a knowing in my spirit that he was going to pass. And as I said, I had been turning him all night long, and I wanted to go home and go to sleep. I did not want to be there in his immediate transition. And I woke everyone up in the house and I said, I am going to go take a nap. Call me when he passes. And they could not believe that I had been up all this time while they all slept and I was leaving, right? And I mean, he was in my perception probably hours within leaving. And so I went home and I went to sleep. Took a shower and went to sleep. It wasn't an hour and I wake up violently. It may have been an hour because I believe I left around 5 in the morning. It wasn't quite an hour or just a little over. I was up vomiting and I knew the transitioning was taking place. Now, I have a phobia of creatures, insects, anything really that moves. That's not a cat or dog. Really don't like cats too much either, but I have a phobia of things that move, small creatures, insects, whatever it is, right? And so, unbeknownst to me, there was a phenomenon that was taking place in my community where there were literally, I would say hundreds of thousands, but there were thousands of monarch butterflies, thousands of monarch butterflies that had been released. And they were swarming everywhere. And you could not drive anywhere without them hitting your window. They were dead on the side of the road in numbers. They looked like dandelions. There were so many of them in the side of the road, on the pavement. It was it was beautiful, but it was also sad that something so beautiful, so many of them were in harm's way just by people driving their cars. It was freaky, which was only to serve as a confirmation of what I was sensing in my physical body. When I finally made it back to my parents' home and I rushed through the door, he had maybe 10 more breaths left. I flew through that door and not thinking about it, I said, I felt you, man. I felt you. I'm here. And I went immediately to him, held him, and said, let's go. By the time I opened my eyes, and well, I don't say open my eyes because I was very intent on him. When I took my eyes off of his last breath, I looked up at my mother And her eyes were so wide. And I looked around the room. Everyone was amazed. The way that they hadn't called me and I just show up like that was a spiritual awareness. And I said, call the time. And I looked up at the clock and I said, 7:08. And my mother said, 7:03. It's 5 minutes fast. I will never forget that. I will never, ever forget that moment that I transitioned from my physical awareness to my spiritual awareness. I will never forget that. So by the time I lost a sister, I already knew that I had come from one understanding about things and what God or who God was and how capable God was. Right? I had transitioned from that thought that I initially had to the understanding that when you have a God that is spiritual in nature, there really are no limits or bounds. None. From that one experience. And that's why I believe that when it goes into this, let me highlight it. I know I'm taking long, but this is for somebody. I don't know who. All of you, hopefully. But as we grow in recovery, so will our understanding. Now, by that time, I had been around from 93 to 2001, right? So I had been around 8 years. We'll begin to see that the only limits to God's love and grace are those we impose by refusing to step out of the way. Literally that day, June 22nd, 2001, I stepped out of the way and I said, wake me when he passes, call me when he passes. The loving God we come to believe is infinite, and the power and love we find in our belief is shared by nearly every recovering addict around the world. Do you know how powerful of a statement that is? We come to believe in is infinite, timeless, and the power and love we find in our belief is shared. The power, right? And love. It didn't say we all have the same. It didn't say we all have the same higher power. It did not say that. It did not say that. It said the power and love we find in our belief. See, the key word is one, we found it, but it's our belief. It's shared. So every recovering addict around the world has the right to have a higher power, a God of their own understanding. And they also can experience the infinite being through love. Right? Hopefully. But we have to get out of the way. We have to surrender. And that is why when I'm working with people, even though I've come to understand that my God is limitless in the capacity to love and care for me. When certain people have certain behaviors, and are in this vicious cycle of active addiction, coming in, leaving, coming in the program, leaving, right? Or being in the program, but in a rut, going around the same circumstance over and over and over, expecting different results. I believe ultimately it comes back to their third step. There's somehow a level of surrender to a higher power that is missing. There's some kind of spiritual confusion. And a lot of times it's religious. And we got to get past that in order to grow. My name is Mighty Stream. I've enjoyed talking to you. Have a beautiful day on purpose.